Okay, hi guys. I'm going to kind of change tack a little bit now. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the sort of practical approaches that we've recently taken in our first departmental submission for a bronze for a department that contains most of our biosciences approach. So I do apologise that this might seem like teaching you to suck eggs, but hopefully there'll be little bits that you'll be able to take away from it. So this is me. I'm the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Science, Engineering and Computing at Kingston University. I'm also the university's Gender Equality Champion. I'm the lead for the Athena SWAN work within the university. And, deep sigh of relief, managed to successfully lead our bronze application for the institutional award fairly recently. And I am currently supporting the School of Life Sciences, Pharmacy and Chemistry, who have just submitted in November 2017. I'm also very closely involved with the university's Race Equality Charter work, for which we currently have a bronze, and we're working towards the silver as we speak. So actually for me, the whole sort of intersectionality piece and really looking at the multiple different types of work that we've got on the go, looking at a huge range of equality issues and making sure that actually we're doing something meaningful in all of them, not simply reinventing the wheel, and trying to ensure that we don't do things 3 times over in a slightly different way. I do apologise now, I have shamelessly stolen information from the ECU site. Really not for you, information, you wouldn't be in the room if you didn't know all about this, but this is kind of where I started from when I took over as the university's Gender Equality Champion, in thinking about how we actually really got Athena SWAN out to the whole institution. And we started with Athena SWAN Roadshows, which I took out to every campus in the university. And that was simply to raise the awareness across all of the university, because we'd moved from the STEM-based approach to it being a much broader piece of work. And actually we had lots of faculties and departments who really quite on board with that. Being from a STEM discipline myself, if you cut me through the middle, I would bleed biology. It was, something that we were very, very familiar with, but lots of other areas were much less so. So our first piece of work was actually getting it out to the whole of the university, and at each one of these roadshow events we ensured that there was a member of the university's senior management team present as well, so that they were able to show that they were behind the initiative and were absolutely helping to drive this forward across the institution. So we ran these roadshows, and at the roadshows we introduced the idea of the institutional approach. We also introduced the idea of the departmental or the school type awards, and set out a brief timeline and a vision and a strategy for the university as to how we wanted to engage the whole institution in this work. So we used lots of pictures like this, and again I'm not going to insult your intelligence by taking you through, but this was starting to really explain to the whole of the institution about what the submissions looked like, how big a thing it really was, and that we really needed to be on board. And to allow staff to digest this information and to think about department awards as well, and to really get a good understanding for what it was that they were going to be part of when we went out to them. And I think it's a bit like we've just heard, I'm sorry I don't know your name, but it's about making sure that people had really thought from the first about what this was going to do for them, what those intrinsic benefits were going to be. And at these roadshows we'd allowed the staff to work across the institution, so professional support staff, staff from all of our academic disciplines and our senior leadership team, to actually look at what it was they felt we needed to change, to have very open discussions, and we captured that information there, and that helped us within our institutional award. So what we then did was to move on and to start to work now specifically thinking about the work we've been doing with our life sciences area, our biosciences. And one of the biggest issues we had there was thinking about departments and actually what a department was. Now in many institutions that's very obvious, but for us it was less obvious. and was actually quite a complicated piece of thinking to do to start with. We had a school of life sciences, pharmacy and chemistry, of which our biological sciences formed two departments, biosciences, biomolecular sciences and applied and human sciences. The other side of the school was pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences and chemistry. And actually for us, when we took the whole thing into account, it made much more sense to go as a larger single department encompassing all of these different disciplines. And that was a decision we made, and I think it is still the right one for us, but it does then throw up significant challenges about how you handle a department or a school that is that diverse and has, you know, things as diverse as sports coaching all the way through to biomedical sciences and to pharmacy. So really very, very different disciplines with very, very different issues to address. So that has been a real challenge for us. And I do recently at lunchtime actually managed to catch up with the ECU staff to have a little chat about how actually some of that complexity can be dealt with in a single application. What we did was, within the departments, we headed it up with our head of school. And the head of school was then very much the champion, taking this forward, being the voice, driving this agenda through that head of school role. And we chose to do it that way. We did have other individuals who put their hands up and said they'd really like to do it. They were passionate about this. But we really felt that having the buy-in from the head of school at the top, actually who then had the budgetary responsibility and was able to alter workload allocation, etc., to facilitate this, was going to be a much better way for us to work. One of the other difficult decisions was around when you actually submit. And that's quite a biggie. We decided to go for a November submission, but I will, when we come on to some of the lessons learned, think in retrospect actually going for an April submission might have been a better decision for the department. This is an overview of the sort of application process, and I'm really sorry it's got small writing, you're probably really struggling over here. But this is sort of the way in which we started to work with the team in asking them to really put together a journey themselves around the application process, how they were going to work as a team to drive this one forward. And from the offset, to give them that timeline, to give them a really structured way forward so that they understood exactly where they were in that journey and what needed to be happening next. One of the first things that we actually did as part of the establishment of the SAT was to go out very early with a survey to all of the department. And we took a very similar approach to one that's just been described. We actually went out via an email campaign, but we then followed it up with coffee mornings. We followed it up with a newsletter about how that campaign was progressing. We gave little snippets of information. We've had, it looks like this is an issue, guys. We haven't done all of the data yet, but these are emerging themes. And we put posters up around the corridors with big, bold colours saying, you know, an emerging theme is, please discuss. And we encouraged those conversations around the coffee machine and around the photocopier to ensure that actually it was something that was constantly on people's agenda. And we think that was very, very effective in helping to keep it live and to keep the motivation going. So having pulled all of that together and had done the survey work, we then did, just as you've heard described earlier on this morning, actually assigned working groups. So we did break that SAT group down into individual working groups with a lead for each of those working groups. And we allocated one of the three areas out to each of those. One of the things that we also realised was going to be quite important here with the working groups was ensuring that, and I'm choosing my words quite carefully, but that one of them didn't go rogue, for example, or fall very far behind in the workload to the other working groups. So we actually used the university's EDI team as a common link and a theme across all of them so that they could report in to the head of school on how those groups were progressing, if there was any issues that were coming up that they felt needed to be discussed at a broader group meeting, and to ensure that there was really good cross-fertilisation between the work that those groups were all doing. And that did work really well for us in giving us a consistency while still allowing those working groups the autonomy to get on and do the tasks that they'd been asked to do. I'm really sorry. Yes, it's small. Three areas: departmental picture, key career transition points and career development, and flexible working, managing career breaks, organisation and culture. These slides will be available to you afterwards, so you don't have to write really fast. We then actually moved on to the sort of, after that, moving it forward into that whole write-up session and submitting the application internally through to the overall submission point. All of that, I think, would follow a fairly natural process. We did undercome one or two issues around writing up. In having had 3 individual working groups writing the chunks, actually pulling that application together, making sure it did read as one document, it just about killed me. You know, I think for anybody that's taking on that role in overseeing it, ensuring that you're getting a holistic approach to that final submission, please don't underestimate the time that that is going to take you. So, thinking about our steps along the way and some of the things that we did struggle with. Our SAT, very important to get the representative mix, absolutely. Very important to get staff who will commit to do the work, absolutely. All of that's a given. Actually ensuring that when you then work with the SAT and break the SAT down into working groups, that you've also thought about those principles in each of those working groups, because it's very easy to have that in your total group. But as you break it down into smaller chunks, sometimes you lose some of that efficacy. And one of the things that we found was that people who were in the same department, people who were in natural friendship groups or who already worked with each other, were very keen to be all in one working group, which actually meant that you weren't getting the breadth of experience and the breadth of input from across the whole school into those group areas. So we did have to engineer some of those groups and suggest that people swapped out and rotated people between groups now and again to ensure that you were getting a much more consistent approach across the piece. Data. Oh dear. Data was a challenge. It was a really difficult thing for us, partly because the department was relatively new and it had been forged from smaller areas brought together into one new school. So there was immediately a challenge there. Partly because we'd changed HR reporting systems halfway through the process and moved from one system to another, which, as you can imagine, didn't report data in the same way. So we were trying to marry up 2 very, very different sets of information. And it was really challenging. It gave us quite a lot to talk about, admittedly, but in purely on the ground, understanding what that data then meant, that was a real challenge. So I think, you know, that any time that you can spend on working with your data, even before the SAT is formed if necessary, in ensuring that the universities really understood what you want, understood the form that you want it in, understood the timelines that you're going to need it by, is absolutely key to being able to pull it all together. We've heard an awful lot around smart action plans. And everything that you've heard is true and more, undoubtedly. It is one of the most difficult bits to pull together. And I think really where this particular department maybe didn't quite get to grips with that is that they didn't start early enough with the action plan. They were working really hard on their sections and they were pulling out bits and pieces where they kind of put a ring round saying, you know, we need an action here. But they hadn't really started to pull together and formulate a cohesive action plan until probably a little bit too late in that journey. So don't leave that action plan until that last step, because it comes at the end of the document. Doesn't mean it's the last bit you should do. So do ensure that you get your teams who are actually writing to really start to think about formulating those actions and thinking about what success would look like as they're going through and really discussing that data, because that's when you're going to get a richness of input that you often lose if they've done all of that hard work and suddenly the action plan becomes a bit of an afterthought. Use your equality and diversity teams. Use support wherever you can get it. Never be afraid to go and knock on somebody's door and go help. We really need somebody to help us pull this together. There will be other people within the institution who have been through departmental awards before. There are institutional teams who will have been there for your institutional awards. And I would urge you to make use of those folks, even if all you use them for is as critical friends, to pass them by chunks of the work, to give them bits and pieces as you go. Again, don't wait until the end when you're presenting them with a 50-page document and they're going, sorry, I'm at a conference next week, I can't do it. Make sure they've seen it in little bits as you go. It's like reviewing a PhD thesis. It's so much easier to actually do it in bits and then have a whole look at the thing when you've seen most of it before. So some of our lessons learnt and things we might do differently. Data, data, data. And it takes longer than you think. It always takes longer than you think. So if you've got a high-level timeline, make sure, even if you don't write it in, that you've got a contingency, that there is a plan B somewhere in your planning. One of the things that we realised was that having aimed for November, actually the summer doesn't half get in the way of a November application. By the time staff have been away for chunks of July, somebody else is away in August, you've then got re-enrolment and other stuff happening in September, it's conference season. You come back in October raring to go and gosh, suddenly the timeline is about there and you can't breathe for looking at Athena SWAN. So really thinking about how that's going to work alongside your academic timelines and some of the other pressure points that you have is, you know, don't be over-ambitious. Give your team time to do it properly. Working groups, absolutely. One of the things that we found was a lifesaver, and it seems really obvious, was using SharePoint, a data box, a Dropbox, whatever else, to allow your teams, even if they're not actually together, to be able to work on things collaboratively. That seems like a really obvious thing, but I act as a critical friend to a couple of other institutions. And one of those recently just hadn't thought about doing it that way and sharing stuff electronically. They were literally moving bits of paper around, which was taking them 3 times as long as it needed to. And just being able to go in and work on an online platform allows you to bring people together. Regular SAT meetings and senior commitment. Again, senior commitment's absolutely obvious. Regular SAT meetings, don't cancel meetings. So even if you suddenly find that there's something else on the go and that half of your SAT team aren't going to be there, actually just keeping up that momentum. The minute that people start to see a slip, it disappears from their diary, getting something else arranged is going to be difficult. You're better off even only having a very small number of people in one of those meetings, but discussing something important, keeping that momentum going, sharing that discussion with the rest of the team, so that you don't allow any slippage to occur. Engaging all the staff and students in the department in the same way as we've just talked about a little bit with the survey and making sure that you've really taken it out as broadly as you can. It is about making sure that everybody is aware that you're doing this and that it's important and what's going to change. So make sure that it's on your school away day agendas. If you've got big away days, make sure it's there. We talked to the students about it in the boards of study and the student staff consultative. It was on the agendas there, so that the students were all aware of what the department was trying to do and why. When we went to heads of school lunches, the head of school of that area, it was one of the things that they were asked to talk about to all of the other heads of school, because actually their turn will come. They're now in the process of doing their own. So ensuring that at whatever level you were having a meeting that involved a group of slightly different staff, that the Athena SWAN application was on that agenda, even only for a couple of minutes.
How long did you keep your staff survey open?
The staff survey ran in the first instance for about 2 weeks. And they ran that using the coffee mornings as well, so that people could catch up and drop in. And they did the 1-week update of emerging themes, so that after a week people could see the sorts of stuff that were beginning to come out from that. But it did work really quite well. And I think one of the other things that we struggled with a little bit is on managing expectation. And possibly, although this seems like a fairly down point to end on, curbing enthusiasm. Because what we found was that staff actually got so engaged with some of the issues that they were talking about that some of the suggestions that they would come up with were absolutely amazing, phenomenal stuff, but they were never going to happen because they would have involved us rewriting the university's insurance policy because, you know, we just couldn't do that. Or being really unrealistic about the sort of timescales that things would happen in. If you were looking at, for instance, anything that involved a change of HR policy that would have to go through 4 different department meetings before it even got to SMT to sign off on a HR change. And, you know, in their action plan saying, oh, we can do this within 3 months. No, we can't. Probably need to put a 1 in front of that because SMT doesn't meet that regularly. And actually really getting folks to think about what they, as a department, were able to change, what they had the ability and the forethought to be able to do there and then and make it happen, where they had to manage upwards and where they might have something that was absolutely inspirational and aspirational, but we might just have to wait for another 4 or 5 years until we were going to ever find a gap to be able to do that. But what we did with those brilliant ideas was actually capture them. So there was a list that we've got, which was our wish list, where staff have actually got a whole host of really interesting ideas, some of which they're now working on taking forward in a different way, tempered down. And rather than saying, no, you're never going to do that, it was that, okay, that really is great. However, these are going to be the challenges. So shall we find a way to just do this bit of it as a starting point? So managing expectation, but never curbing their enthusiasm. Thanks, guys.
Right, we've got time for some quick questions for Lucy. I know you've been asking questions as she went along. Anyone got anything else? Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for all the very practical details. In terms of administration, did you have an administrator assigned to the department, or how did you work with that?
We were quite lucky in that I had, we used one, the head of school's PA actually was very helpful in helping us in administering some of the very simple note-taking and handling of meeting arrangements and so on. But at a slightly more strategic level, I had a faculty project manager, and part of her time was assigned to helping to oversee and to drive some of this forward. And that was part of a faculty resource commitment to supporting the school in achieving it.